Governing the Ungovernable, Ishrat Hussain, Institutional Reforms for Democratic Governance. Introduction. Pakistan was one of the top 10 economic performers among the developing countries in the world during the first 40 years of its existence, beginning with a very weak economic base at the time of independence in 1947 and a tumultuous period of nation building, marked by continuing political instability in the aftermath of the death of its founder, Muhammad Ali Jinnah. Its record of achievement during the first 4 decades was impressive. It successfully absorbed and rehabilitated 8 million refugees, or one-fourth of its total population, fought a war with India, a much larger and more powerful neighbor, in 1965, and underwent a painful and traumatic dismemberment of the country in 1971. The emergence of a populist political regime that undertook massive nationalization of private assets in the 1970s, accompanied by an external shock of a major escalation of oil prices, dealt a massive blow to business confidence and led to a complete dislocation of the economy. Polo's involvement with the US in the Afghan War to oust the Soviet Union in the 1980 and the associated fallout. The spread of sectarian violence, drugs, and Kalashnikovs tore asunder the social fabric of the country. Notwithstanding these and many other challenges, both internal and external, Pakistan was able to register an average of 6% annual growth during its first 40 years of existence. Pakistan was ahead of India and Bangladesh in all economic and social indicators. According to some analysts, Pakistan had reached the threshold of becoming a middle-income nation in the late 1980s, according to Burki. In the late 1980s, Pakistan had begun to exhibit many of the characteristics of a middle-income country. It was less dependent on agriculture than most low-income countries and had an industrial sector that was comparable in size and diversity to those in many middle-income nations. It had a vast reservoir of highly trained laborers. It had a middle class numbering more than 30 million people, and it was an urbanized as the more developed country of East Asia and the Middle East. In the 1990s, however, the expectation that Pakistan is on the verge of the crossing the threshold to become a middle-income country has ceased to exist. Since 1990, Pakistan has fallen behind its neighboring countries and has had a decrease in the potential growth rate from 6.5 to 4.5%, with episodes of boom and bust. The booms were short-lived and could not be sustained over extended periods of time. Political instability and frequent changes of government in the 1990s may have created uncertainty for investors, thus slowing down the pace of economic activity. There has, however, been smooth and orderly transition of power from one elected government to the other twice since 2008, but economic and social indicators have not shown much improvement. Growth has been slow, less stable, more volatile, and far less sustained than that of other countries in the region, and also relative to its own performance in the 2000 to 2007 period. It is only over the past 2 years that some change for the better is becoming visible, but whether it will be stable and sustainable in the years leading up to the general elections is yet to be seen. Externally, the popular image of Pakistan is that of a fragile or failed state with a large and expanding arsenal of nuclear weapons encircled by Islamic extremists and a safe haven for nurturing and training terrorists who pose a threat to other countries. There is considerable unease in the international community about the rivalry and hostility between nuclear-armed India and Pakistan, who have thrice fought wars against each other. The eastern part of Pakistan was separated from the western in 1971 as consequence of a war in which India played a decisive role. Kashmir continues to remain a highly contentious and volatile powder keg. Relations with Afghanistan remain tense, and mutual recriminations and mistrust have vitiated the atmosphere. Also, Pakistan is a non-NATO ally of the United States. The general sentiment in both countries about each other is not overly favorable. The US considers Pakistan duplicitous in its dealings with the Afghan Taliban and the Haqqani network. While Pakistan is better than notwithstanding it incurring significant losses and sacrificing hundreds of thousands of lives, its role in the war against terror is not fully appreciated. Pakistan is perceived by those beyond its borders as a source of regional instability and as an ungovernable country. Therefore, the popular hypothesis about Pakistan's economic drift is explained by this increasing influence of religious extremists and terrorists who have threatened law and order and distributed the peace and security. Economic agents are reluctant to undertake new investments in this environment. This hypothesis may be partially valid, but the economic decline had begun in the 1990s, well before Pakistan was embroiled in the war against terror in the post 2001 period. The average growth rate in the 1990s, when the country was relatively peaceful and tranquil, was already down from 6.5% in the 1980 to 4%. Investment ratios, export growth, and social indicators all took a dip in those years. Poverty, which was showing a downward decline until the 1980s, worsened by the end of the 1990s. In contradiction to this trend, the 2002 to 2008 period, which was a period of acute violence and terror activity in Pakistan, including assassination attempts and terrorist attacks on the sitting president and prime minister, the country recorded a remarkable turnaround. The growth rate touched 6 to 7% on average. The investment GDP ratio peaked at 23%, and foreign direct investment flows exceeded $5 billion. The chief investment officer of a Swedish mutual fund had this to say: "It was not until the end of 2008 that I first traveled to Pakistan and met with around 30 companies. Some of these companies were family owned and had been around for 40, 50 years. The businesses were growing at an average of 10%, and the political or security situation was not having much negative impact on their performance. During the past 7 years of tumultuous turmoil resulting from terrorist activities reaching a peak, the corporate sector earning growth on annual compound average growth rate basis has been around 20%, with the return on equity in excess of 25%. The recent experience of the 2013 to 2016 period is eliminating macroeconomic stability has been achieved. Economic growth rates are moving in an upward direction, and the confidence of domestic and international investors has been restored. Pakistan has been upgraded to the MSCI EM index from the FM index, and its credit ratings by Moody's and Standard and Poor have also risen, negating the view that Pakistan's security situation and its deep involvement in the war against terrorism is responsible for its poor economic and social performance. Therefore, the security deficit hypothesis does not stand up to serious scrutiny. It is true that if the huge financial and human costs incurred in combating terrorism, the restrictions on travel to and from Pakistan, and the suspicion with which Pakistanis are regarded were eliminated, the economic upturn would have been even higher in the 2002 to 2016 period. There is a group of analysts who argue that availability of generous foreign assistance has been the principal determinant of Pakistan's economic success or failure, and that its fortunes vacillate with the ebb and flow of resources from external donors. It has been argued that the three periods of economic spurts in the history of Pakistan, the 1960, 1980, and early 2000, can be attributed to the heavy infusion of these resources into the country. In the 1960s, Pakistan was a NATO and NATO ally and was closely aligned with the US in the Cold War. In the 1980s, the country participated actively with the US in ousting the Soviet Union from Afghanistan, and in early 2000, Pakistan was rewarded for its pivotal role in the war against terror. It is therefore argued that Pakistan was the recipient of large military and economic assistance, and that was the major reason for the turnaround in these periods. Notwithstanding this popular perception, the empirical evidence does not prove this assertion. In the 1950s, Pakistan received huge military, civilian, and food aid, with the PL-40 imports of food from the US keeping hunger at bay. In the 1970s, Pakistan was granted through debt rescheduling substantial debt relief, with over two-thirds of the debt payments of US $650 million due during 1974 to 1977 being written off. Western aid through the World Bank led consortium amounted to $700 million annually, but on top of this, official grants and concessional loans, some of which were subsequently transformed into grants, are waived from oil-rich Arab countries, and overseas workers' remittances financed the huge imbalances in current account.